Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Steaks. Today, we're here to talk some hoops. Blake, basketball season's underway. I know in the middle of SEC country that gets a little forgotten during football season, but I know two guys who don't forget that.
Let me tell you, there's more than two guys who don't forget that because for all the newcomers to our channel and the thousands of you out there that have hit that subscribe button, hundreds, if not 1,000 or so of you joined the channel initially because of our basketball stuff. And so we are back for another season. And this is our first, think about that, our first reaction to actual games of the season. And that's when you know that things are getting exciting on the basketball front. So, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff from opening nights, but as I always say, not a lot of stuff to overreact to, which we love to do in our profession sometimes. Don't overreact to everything you saw on opening night. There's my initial statement here on election day, Chris. So if you're looking to vote, don't vote for me, but because I'm just giving you my state of the SEC basketball address here, and don't overreact to everything you saw on opening night.
We offer no help or advice with voting. Let's just make that clear.
Unless you're voting for us.
And if you're voting for us, then great. My brother voted for Derrick Henry one year for something because he felt he had the best year of anybody in the state of Tennessee.
Well, if you watch the Titans against the Chiefs, that would have been accurate as well this past weekend. But
yes.
Nonetheless.
I vote for a wide receiver. But anyway, that's the wrong conversation to have. Let's talk hoops. Weren't a lot of marquee games in the league last night, to say the least. The biggest one was Vandy and Memphis. We're in Nashville. I was at that one. I'll offer some comments on that one later. You had some games get interesting. Missouri and Southern Indiana got interesting in a number of ways. I know you've got a take on that probably a lot of people don't have. You had Kentucky down some men, some key guys, but handling Howard pretty easily anyway. Vanderbilt was the only SEC team that lost last night. I know we talked off air. You thought that George Mason and Auburn could be sneakily interesting. 18-point final score. Didn't turn out that way, I guess. You had Arkansas down Nick Smith. You had Tennessee rolling with Tyreek Key playing a big role last night. What's the biggest thing or the biggest couple things that stood out to you last night?
Okay, it's where do you even start? Obviously, I went through and watched every game from start to finish. Just keep that in mind, everyone. We always, we said that last year, keep in mind on nights like this where every team is playing someone different, it's literally not possible to watch every single game by the time we do our recordings on Tuesday or the day after. So
that's what I love in the comments of our football videos. It's obviously these guys don't watch football. I'm like, well, wait a minute. We watch all the teams. We just don't watch them all the time.
Well, and here's the thing. You can't watch every game at the same time in full. You can put 10 TVs up, but guess what? You can say you're watching all 10 of them, but you're not because you can't. It's not possible. But what I usually do, and you guys know this by now, this has always been my kind of routine, is I'll go back and watch a lot of these games, good chunks of them, when you do have nights like that where you have so many games. And again, it's non-conference play. Teams aren't playing each other. So I did that. I watched a little bit of every game last night. That was my goal, was to watch a little bit. And now I've already gone back and watched a bit more of several of these games already just to kind of get a better feel of where things stood. So I'll start by saying this. Kentucky's going to be really good. The Cats played without Sheboy, Wheeler, Collins. I know it was Howard, but the thing with Kentucky is, and I saw a lot of people, Chris, with their reaction of, I think this Kentucky team's going to be able to shoot the ball. Well, you think?
CJ Frederick was their leading scorer, was he not?
I think wasn't Reeves their leading scorer, I believe.
You're right.
Reeves
had
terrific.
22 and Reeves had 22 and Frederick had 20. But Frederick was a guy that we had Jeff Drummond on our show, and he said that Frederick was their best 3-point shooter last year, but he was hurt and he didn't play. So,
well, but here's the deal. My point was going to be, a lot of people are shocked by the fact Kentucky hit threes. You shouldn't be shocked at all. We mentioned this in our preview, in that when you have Reeves, when you have Frederick, they're going to make some shots. They combined to hit 8 threes last night. Reeves went 6 of 12. Frederick went 2 of 5. And again, keep in mind they're playing without Chibwe and Wheeler, who are going to be two of their top scorers. So I think that's the difference. Like just seeing those guys out there being able to make shots. Um, we said that was going to be a big storyline this season, and the fact that it's game one, I think it's pretty clear that they do have guys that can make shots from outside, and that can be a big separator for this Kentucky team. I think. A couple other things that stood out for me, and this isn't going to be an entire just Kentucky show, but I mean they are the top ranked team, and I think these are a couple things we're talking about. I really love Wallace's game. I think, you watch him play, I mean, Casey Wallace just got a smooth type game. I think there's a lot to like there. He led them in minutes, played 35 minutes. I feel like he's going to be one of those guys that's just never going to come off the floor. And I'm not just saying that because he played 35 minutes last night, but he's just got a smooth confidence to him. And I think that he's going to be really good. And the other guy, I'm going to tell you right now, Onyenso is going to be a stud. Like he played 20 minutes last night, 6 points, 4 blocks, 4 rebounds. You can just see it. I said it after the exhibition game. I don't remember who I was telling it to. I think it was Sam Snelling at Rock M Nation. Did a podcast with him. I said you've got to. We were all on board saying this guy has got something, and I just think he's going to wind up being really good. Not saying he's going to play 40 minutes a game or anything, but there's a very talented freshman right there to keep your eye on with the Cats. I'm trying to I've got so many notes here, and it's like I don't even know where to go next. So how about this, Chris? If there's anything that catches your eye, that you want, let's go into Vandy and Memphis real quick, and then we'll go back to the other stuff in a second.
Yeah, Memphis played a full court trapping, pressing defense that didn't really give Vandy a ton of problems, I didn't think. Ezra Manhone is the replacement for Scottie Pippen Jr. Did not have a great game. But what happened is Memphis played a very aggressive 2-3 zone and got out on shooters. And the thing we said about Vandy going in was, I know that program has improved. It was improved a lot last year. Got to the quarterfinals of the NIT, lost by a point to Xavier. But Scottie Pippen Jr. was such a big part of what Vandy did a year ago. And the stats, look, he averaged 20 points or more 2 years in a row. He'd have nights he'd hit 15 foul shots. I mean, he just, Miles Studi led the SEC in three-point shooting last year. But I think a lot of that was because everybody was worried about Pippen. Every time Pippen got in the lane, you'd see another guy slide over. There's just not anybody to fear on Vanderbilt's team like that this year. That was only a 9-point game at the end, but that wasn't really indicative of what it was. Memphis literally led from the tip. Led by 17 at one point in the first half, led by 19 at one point in the second half. Vandy, when it got it down to 9 at the end, that's the lowest it was for most of the second half. I just don't see it offensively with them. Now, they've got some freshmen, Colin Smith being one who are going to play a lot, but I don't think they've got the veteran supporting cast. And this is a way too early take. And Jerry Stackhouse's teams, since he's been there, they have played their best ball February and March. And so I think there's a long way to go between now and then. But I think you probably watched it too. I just don't feel like Vanderbilt has got the horses to get out of that, that Wednesday game of the tournament, which has been elusive for Vanderbilt lately.
No, I mean, here's my notes. First note is not sure about scoring. Those are the 4 words I have written down.
Yeah.
I don't. That was the first thing was my takeaway from watching that game.
And that was our concern before the game.
Yeah, just not sure about scoring. That's it. And I'm just not sure where they're going to get those points out night in, night out. But I just think what Jordan Wright had 7. It's going to be hard for them to win those kind of games.
They were 2 of 17 to start, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't good. They had some stretches there, and look, they weren't the only one in the SEC that had some of those just pretty frustrating offensive stretches last night. But I do think that's something that's going to stand out with this team. You've got to get more, out of Ezra Mannion. I think that he's got to be able to, certainly help them more, probably from a scoring standpoint. And I think just elsewhere, again, Jordan Wright only having 7, I think you're gonna struggle to beat teams. And the depth I think we talked about was interesting, but I don't know that
Their
that
rotation
depth's
was
there.
all over the place
Well,
last
but
night.
here's at the very top of my notes that I have in no section of any game, but here's the overarching thing I have in my notes. Everybody across the league playing a lot of different rotations last night.
Mhm.
Okay. Like there are certain teams who played 11 or 12 guys. They're not going to play 10 to 12 guys every single night. So I think we have to keep that in mind. This is what coaches do. They use the non conference to try to figure out some things early on. And so when you look at some of these scores, for example, I'm not just saying this, and we always have the fun with Dennis Gates, but I mean they played a ton of guys last night, and they left rotations in that may not have been as efficient as you would have wanted to see. But my guess is it's just allowing the coaches to see how these guys can play through certain things, certain situations, and I think you saw that all across the league. Like that was something that stood out in the Missouri game. There were a couple other teams I've got here that just played a ton of guys. It's just how it works. And so I think, that at least gives you a starting point if you're Jerry Stackhouse, just to look at and say, all right, we plug some of these guys here in a very key game to start the season. And this guy didn't particularly do what we thought he would, and so forth. Like, I think I don't know how much I read into that just yet, but I do think there's something to the scoring factor. And I think that will be something that stands out for this Vanderbilt team moving forward.
What you got next?
All right, next up. I mean, where do we? It's like let me just like if you're watching this, there's no chance we're gonna be able to talk about every game in detail here, but I'm just giving you my kind of highlights. Trevon Brazile. How about we go there next? Because
Yeah.
boy, this guy. Did we say he was going to be good or what? And we're not the only ones that said that. I mean, it was pretty clear last year at Missouri. This guy had a ton of upside. Um, and he just, yeah, like you saw it last night, 21 and 12, I think it was. Arkansas beat North Dakota State by 18. Like you said earlier, no Nick Smith. Ricky Council played well at 22 points. I still think Davis going to be that guy that sort of makes them go, having a returner like that with the experience. He played well too, I thought. But Brazile, I mean, you've just got a guy. I mean, you've got a future, NBA talent in terms of just what he can do and kind of the skill set that he has. And I just think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch him play with this team and really just see the upside of a guy I mean, let's keep that in mind too, right? Like this guy is still just a sophomore. And I mean, that's kind of the fun thing to really think about here is he's 6'10, sophomore, got all the potential in the world. And that's the kind of start I think you wanted to see from him in that game. I just think his athleticism, he's just tremendous. I think he's going to really be a fun player to watch this season. So that was something that I thought that stood out for Arkansas. Again, it's hard to have a full picture on them without Nick Smith in the lineup, but I do think that's something that was kind of there for the Hawks.
Yeah, first of all, Nick Smith. I think he's not supposed to be out long. Correct?
Yeah, I don't think so.
And one of the Mitchell twins didn't play. What was up with that?
I'd love to tell you, Chris, but when
you
you're
mean
keeping
you
up with
didn't catch everything
13
last
different
night?
games, there are some notes that I'm sure I missed. So, yeah, I don't exactly know. I saw the Nick Smith thing, but I'll just be honest, I haven't saw every little tiny detail just yet on anything else. So,
I really left you out to dry on that one, didn't I?
well, that's what people are used to. So,
That's right.
I think it was Mikal
Love you
Mitchell that
too,
didn't
buddy.
play. So, anyways, all right, Chris, I'd like you to list off the SEC stats for every pitcher in the league as of November the 8th, and we're gonna just let you
Right.
take the floor here for the next 15 minutes. No, in all seriousness, I think that some other stuff that stood out. Tennessee, transfers was a big theme here because I thought Tyreek Key looked good for Tennessee. They blew out Tennessee Tech. He had 17. He just when you watch him play, like he just has a confidence to him. I like to see that. But Chris, I will note they won by 32. If you're wanting to pick apart some things with Tennessee, I mean they went 14 of 44 from three. They shot 44
I couldn't
threes
believe it when I
last
looked
night.
and they just got 44 3-pointers. I'm like, who is
Well,
coaching this team?
But here's the thing: is like early on, one of the stretches I was watching live. I mean, they would put up a three, and man, it was just like clang, 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 and like, but they just like it just kept shooting, and that's fine. Like they're gonna go in at some point. So I know people may make a big deal again. Game one, they did have some of those stretches. I don't know, it wasn't a lot of them, but where they struggled to make shots consistently. I think they only shot 40% or something from the floor, I believe it was. But again, I don't read too much into that. I think it's one game, and there's no way I'm just overreacting to a one game sample size. But they did shoot a lot of threes. That was something that stood out for the Vols. In that one, they had 17 steals. Of course, they're going to be a really good defensive team. Let's go back to that Auburn George Mason game for a second.
One more point on Tennessee. I think we wondered where Tyreek Key would fit in. He scored a lot of points at, what was it, Indiana State? I believe he got 26 against Gonzaga, came off the bench and got 17 in 24 minutes. I mean, look, they're going to play three guards, but Ziegler and Vescovy are going to be on the floor a lot. So I think one of my questions was how much time does he get? How big of a part of what they do is he? And I think that seems like that's been answered through one exhibition game against a Giant and then the Tennessee Tech game, perhaps.
No, if you watch the game, like he's going to be on the floor. Like I think he's got to be. Again, I said kind of the confidence. I think he's just got a lot of confidence, and in his game, and they need a guy like that offensively, perhaps on this team. If a Vescovy and Ziegler aren't making shots, because that's something too, right? They shot 44 threes. Ziegler and Vescovy shot 20 of those combined. They only made 5 of them. So if those guys are struggling to make shots, then you need a guy like Key, and I think that gives them the perfect kind of setup here. With that, one of the things I still think that Tennessee 1 through 7, it's a really good group. And Meshack also played. He played 19 minutes in that game. Keep in mind too, some blowout minutes are a little deceiving. But Julian Phillips, I thought did some good things. But like I said, this is a game Tennessee should have won the way they did, and how much you read into that, I don't know. Auburn George Mason, I mean, you mentioned earlier, I thought it could be a sneaky good game because I think George Mason's going to be a pretty good team. And, Auburn did some things pretty well in this game. I thought Broom looked good, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 4 blocks. Wendell Green had 16, Katie Johnson had 12 off the bench. I think there were still some, things with shots and maybe shot selection at times, but why even keep going into that, storyline? I think we just know that's how they're going to play their offense. And one thing that did stand out, Chris, the stat that you have to circle, and I know it's just one game, but I think this is something we talked about coming the season. We've talked about in recent seasons. They went 4-25 from 3. And, I think that's still going to be something for this Auburn team, the 3-point shot. I'm curious to see what that looks like, because they didn't make a lot of shots from outside. So I don't know what that looks like long term, but I think that's one of the things we had circled with this team coming into the season. We kind of said, 269th, 225th, and 301st in 3-point percentage the past 3 seasons. Hasn't been a great shooting team. I don't know where that 3-point production necessarily comes from unless you just get 1 or 2 of these guys that get hot. So that's something to keep in mind maybe with Auburn. But I did like the way Broom looked. I thought he played, clearly a guy coming in. I think that'll fit in just fine, in the SEC. And, so that was something that certainly stood out. And once again, my guy, Chris, Zep Jasper, I'm going to keep bringing this up. We're going to have a running theme here. How many turnovers did he have? 0.
I'm guessing none.
None. Because this guy doesn't turn the ball over, like ever. He just never turns the ball over. So 17 minutes, no turnovers. But nonetheless, I think that's going to be I think George Mason, Kim English does a good job with that team. That's a really nice win, I think, for Auburn to start the season. So,
yeah, Auburn started Jasper and Green and had Katie Johnson and Flanagan coming off the bench. I don't know what you make of that, but it was what happened last night.
Yeah, I mean, Flanagan struggled to make shots, but I mean, I
hate to see that.
Well, here's the thing. I think struggling to make shots in game 1, I don't. That's another thing I don't like to lean too far into, because there are other. I mean, for example, a Mark Sears, right? What did he shoot? Let me find my Alabama notes here. He didn't shoot it well either, and I think these are the kind of things that sometimes just have those games like that where you're just not going to shoot it well. Yeah, I'm pulling up my notes here on Sears. With 2 of 11 from the floor, still scored 12 points, had 10 rebounds, 5 assists for Alabama in their 75-54 win over Longwood. But I just think sometimes it's game 1. I don't want to go too far into that on that. But speaking of Alabama, I thought I guess we are going to maybe run the gamut here. I'm going to try to get a note in for every team here. Brandon Miller. Here's my notes on Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller is that dude. That is what I got. That's what I got written here.
14 and 13. That's pretty good for a first night.
I mean, it's just he's good. And that shouldn't surprise anybody. I thought he played really well. Again, he'll make more shots as things go along. Efficiency numbers should get better. But that entire freshman group, I thought, I really liked what I saw from Clowney. Clowney got the start here. Another guy, I think, just smooth, 9 points, 11 rebounds, added a couple blocks in there. Ryan Griffin played 27 minutes at 14 points. Ryan Griffin. I said Ryan Griffin.
Yeah.
I think he was a former.
Not the former Texas.
I was about to say. I think
you've had your head in fantasy football this morning.
I have.
Haven't you?
I have.
Right.
I'm doing a little fantasy football action, but yes. So I think this group for Alabama, again, they played a lot of guys, but I mean, they're, I think you're pretty solid in terms of the group that's going to play. Because, I mean, this is one where they won 75-54, but if you look at the distribution of minutes, I mean, you really had 7 guys who really played the bulk of the minutes. And that was the starting 5 of Clowney, Miller, Bediako, Namari Burnett, Mark Sears, and then Rylan Griffin and Jaden Bradley, who, again, Bradley had 11. So, like, that freshman group, we talked about the guys they had coming in, but that freshman group, is still one there. And I don't know. I've got to look up some other stuff, but I think that this is. I think Alabama's got the upside you want to see from a team that a lot of people picked in the top 5 of the league. So.
I don't think we spent a lot of time when we talked about Alabama talking about Noah Clowney and Rylan Griffin. I know we mentioned Clowney a little bit. I'm sure we talked about Griffin. I don't remember it a lot. That's one thing that stood out to me to see those guys so prominently, well, at least according to the box score, contributing last night. I mean, well, and
keep in mind, Welch didn't play. I know he's not a freshman, but keep that in mind too. Alabama didn't have
part of it.
Dominic Welch, yeah. So.
What was the story there?
Pretty sure just an injury situation, And remember, Quinterly's not there too. Like, so it's like, that's something else you think about. Like, you saw the upside with this freshman group. They may not all play the minutes they played last night because you're going to have Welch and Quinterly coming back. But I tell you, man, they certainly have the depth. I still think when you look at it from a depth standpoint, Alabama might be the deepest team in the league. And I'm talking about. I mean, really, when you compare them to other teams, like realistically, I think they could be the deepest team in the league. Right there, I guess who probably put Kentucky.
In a year where there's a lot of deep teams in my mind.
I was gonna say a lot of deep teams, but their depth is certainly one of their strengths for sure. So, what else?
On Alabama, I would have liked to see Namari Burnett go better than 1 for 6 from the field. I know that it's game 1. That's not a lot, but I mean, shooting was the issue at Texas Tech. So there was that. Who have we not hit? We've not hit a lot of people. We've gone.
Listen, there's no way to do.
You're saving it all for Dennis Gates, aren't you?
Well, there's no way. Let's just run. I'm going to run through. It's going to be like Chris Berman 2-minute drill here. All right, Mississippi State 63, A&M Corpus Christi 44, Tolu Smith with 19. No one else had above 7. I think that could be a potential issue this season for Mississippi State. Chris, I said I thought they could be the worst 3-point shooting team in the league. Went 6 of 25, so not terrible. Auburn shot worse, I suppose. Had 16 turnovers, trailed by 12 midway through the first half, but were able to correct that and get a solid win there. A&M 87, Monroe 54. A&M shot 51%, made 12 3-pointers, 5 players in double figures. Solomon Washington started in there. And again, we don't read too much into startings, but we did mention him as kind of an intriguing guy on that roster. So the fact that he got a start, perhaps, kind of tells you what they think his or what his potential could be this season. Played some minutes there.
The minutes on that one were exactly what we thought they could be. We talked about how many they just have a lot of guys, maybe not a star other than Henry Coleman III, if you consider him a star, which I think he's close enough that we can do that. But, I mean, they had, 10 guys play a dozen minutes or more?
Yeah. The depth too. We
No,
said
make
the
that
depth
11.
would be a
Yeah.
strength for A&M. And look, to blow out, like we said, don't read too much into minutes necessarily. But it's at least something to get the guys out there and see what you have. Georgia 68, Western Carolina 55. That's a game that's actually kind of sneaky good. I don't know if you, depending on what you think of good as the right word, but it was a close game. Western Carolina made a run early in the second half. Quindo, 18 points. Frank Anselm, 11 in 13 minutes for Georgia. I think he had 5 turnovers, though. I don't know. I didn't see all those, but they only attempted 10 3-pointers. I don't think that's going to be a hot shooting team necessarily either. I think that's kind of what we expected, though. They only made 3 of those, but they turned the ball over 21 times. That's something I think that Mike White will certainly want to have corrected, I think, for Georgia there. And again, that was that was definitely a feeling your way through kind of what your roster is type game to me watching them play. And again, you just had some guys that I think will play better and be a bit more efficient, probably moving forward. Florida just
Hey,
trounced.
one thing on the Georgia game, I don't know what to make of this, but Braylon Bridges came off the bench last night.
Yeah, he still played 20 minutes, I think, though.
Yeah.
I don't read too much into the starting thing. Like I said, I kind of do with some guys in terms of if you don't know if guys are going to factor into the rotation or how they're going to, and then maybe they start, they may still not play a lot of minutes, but I think that's something that's I don't know. Like, because again, like Katie Johnson comes off the bench for Auburn, and I just think that's kind of can be overblown sometimes because not especially when you have depth. I don't think a lot of teams are just leaning on their starting 5. I think there's guys you're going to have off the bench that are there for those specific roles. But it is something worth noting, for sure. There. Where was I going next? Florida, 81. Stony Brook, 45. Alex Fudge with 16. Will Richard, 14. Colin Castleton with 13. They hit 10 threes. I enjoyed watching Florida's offense. That's in my notes here because sometimes that
Blake.
Well, no, it's like sometimes that's that was not always the case in the past, and I'm not knocking anybody for that, but so Florida, I thought got off to a nice start in the Todd Golden era. Kind of a good win here, and to see some of those transfers get off to good starts, that's always important. Again, Fudd and Richard combining for 30 there. That was nice to see. Ole Miss 73, Alcorn State 58. Matthew Morrell with 20, Allen with 15. Obviously, like to have those two guys doing their thing. Ruffin didn't play, so keep that in mind too. That was
that an injury?
I would assume that's the case. And I think he didn't. I just think they pretty much already knew he was
played a minute last night. I didn't see that one coming either.
Yeah, I think Ruffin's considered week to week at this point, so I don't know if that's what that's like. But I think there was a setback, was what Kermit Davis used as the term, which you don't love to hear that.
Javius McGinnis only played a minute or 7 minutes last night. Only got 1 foul. I would have thought he would have been a bigger part of what they did. The kid from Jackson State who averaged a double-double.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch.
You don't know how swag stuff translates, but
yeah,
that was he started, but he only played 7.
I'm not sure what the story was there, but I didn't get to watch. I watched a little bit of the second half of that game. That's still on my to-do list in terms of games to watch more of. Just didn't get a chance to watch a ton of that one last night with all the other notes. And then, of course, Chris, the one game we've not yet discussed in full detail. Missouri 97, Southern Indiana 91. Now think about this. If you're a Missouri fan, you can certainly be frustrated, I suppose, or be disappointed that you only beat Southern Indiana by 6. At the same time, if you compare the eras of Missouri basketball, I think you're fine with winning a 97-91 game versus a 55-53 game, right? Like I think if you're gonna play some of those games, like if we give up points, great, but if we score a lot of points, that's even better. So we're fine with our defense slipping a little bit if it means we score some points. Now, something to keep in mind here: Southern Indiana just got off to a terrible start from 3. Like they didn't make a lot of. I don't even remember what the number was specifically. I had it at some point, but apparently it's no longer in my notes here. But they were not making threes early on. But then they just started making everything, and they wind up making 15 threes in this game. With some of that defense, I'm sure. With some of that just making shots, yes. I think it's a little of both. So I think if you're looking at that and you want to, throw my client Dennis Gates under the bus. Don't do that just yet. Here's what I also have in my notes, Chris. By the way, just keep in mind here, we totally underestimated, I think, the impact Kobe Brown's going to have. And I don't mean we underestimated in terms of we said he can be an all SEC player, but I think like he's going to be, I don't say he's going to be, he has to be a double guy. I think most of the nights for this Missouri team to be successful. Because we said you're mixing in a lot of new pieces. And I think it's pretty clear that he's going to have to be, if he's not in the game, I think you're talking about a team that you will have some questions about on both sides, whether it's offense, whether it's rebounding, those kind of things. I think there are going to be some questions because he is really good and he just brings a dynamic that they don't have elsewhere on that roster. So that's something that stood out. Even in the exhibition game they had, I guess it was last week, that was something that you pretty much understood was going to be the case. Now, the Isaiah Mosley situation is interesting here because I don't know. I do think part of this was Dennis Gates just working in different rotations and wanting to see certain things from a different group of five in certain scenarios. I think that had to be part of it. He only had 4 points, right? But keep in mind, Isaiah Mosley only has 4 points, but they had 8 players score between 8 and 20 points on that team last night, and he's not one of them. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about. They've got a lot of versatile, like offensive players here. And I think that's one that kind of stood out, even though the Isaiah Mosley thing is what a lot of people are going to be talking about. Again, don't know, maybe why he's not playing in some of those scenarios down the stretch. Don't know if it's just it's a situational thing where you're looking at different guys. But I know the giving up a lot of points will be something that stands out, but in the grand scheme of things, I think you saw some flashes of what some of these guys can do, like a Demoy Hodge, Trey Gomillion. I said Chris, I thought was going to be kind of the rock of that team. Not talking about Dwayne Johnson, the blockbuster movie star, but just kind of the guy they could lean on. 12 points in 14 minutes, gave him 5 rebounds, 3 assists, no turnovers. I just think he's one of those guys that just kind of the familiarity with Dennis Gates too will be a big part of helping them move forward. And look, Aiden Shaw, Sean East, I thought were guys who came in and did some good things too. So yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind with this Missouri team.
Muhammad Diarra, their JUCO big, who averaged 18 and 13 a year ago. I know we talked off pod. You thought that he might not be ready, is ready to contribute as his lofty JUCO ranking and stat line suggested. And I don't know if it was injury or something else, but he didn't play last night.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what I think he was there. I just don't think he played. So again, you don't know if that's injury stuff or what. So it could be related to that.
Ronnie DeGray only played 2 minutes. He played 25 a game for Missouri last year.
Not surprised.
Yeah, don't know what to make of that, but
I'm not that surprised. I think that you just got a lot of guys who are probably ahead on the depth chart at the moment. So yeah.
Well, I mean, he was a guy last year, was a supporting cast player.
Yeah.
For a team that had Kobe Brown and at the end Trevon Brazile and not a lot. And like Dennis Gates has recruited through the transfer portal much better talent. So
yeah,
it makes sense.
Whew. There you go. I said we weren't going to hit every game, but we did. We managed to give you a little nugget of every game. So hopefully you guys find this valuable. I know, again, if you're a newcomer to the channel, you're not used to us doing these longer SEC basketball videos. Keep in mind, too, I haven't even started our preview videos yet for these games, which we will do in the non-conference. Honestly, guys, like we'll do it for some game days, like probably not for the ones that just have this many games, but we will do probably some preview videos for some of the bigger games. I think that's definitely the plan, and we'll obviously always have our reaction videos unless it's just a one game set. Like, for example, nothing against South Carolina, but tonight South Carolina's going to play South Carolina State. Probably a good chance we will not have a single video related to that, just based out of demand and those kind of things. So, so if you want to just keep up with all of our SEC basketball stuff, hit that subscribe button.
Not a lot of great names nationally or great games nationally on Monday night. I guess the biggest thing that stands out in the top 25 is TCU really struggled with Pine Bluff, won that one by a point. So Everybody else in the top 25 won. Well, they won 2, but anyway.
Not a good opening night in terms of
No, it's
games.
not. What happened to opening night? We used to get a Duke Kentucky kind of game.
Listen, man, I tell you, here's what I think, and there's many reasons, but I think it's because teams have changed so much to where we are in the transfer era. Coaches want to figure out their teams like early on in the season. I think that can be a big part of it too. Is maybe I don't want to go out and play a top team on night one because I don't know what I have yet because I got 8 new players, So I think there's something to that. So I get it on both sides, I suppose, if you're looking at it from a coaching standpoint. But if you're a viewer of college basketball, yeah, it's not a great slate for sure. So,
parting thoughts.
South Carolina plays South Carolina State, and then I think the next kind of game night for the SEC. Let me pull it up here.
I know this. Okay, LSU and
Friday.
Kansas City on Wednesday.
Yeah, well, Friday is going to be the next big game night. Although
we've got
big is a bit of an overstatement. Georgia at Wake Forest is about the only. Well, I say that
Clemson, South Carolina will be interesting just because of the rivalry aspect.
Forget everything I said. Friday, there's actually some interesting games here. Okay, Kentucky plays Duquesne. That's. I like what Keith Ambrot's done there. So that's something. Alabama plays Liberty. Richard McKay always does a good job with Liberty. Yeah. So that's one that will be kind of an interesting matchup.
They will grind you in the half court.
A&M plays Abilene Christian, another team that I think, may be interesting, although I think they struggled to win over Jackson State in game 1. Mississippi State plays Akron. Ole Miss plays Florida Atlantic. Georgia goes to Wake Forest. Probably get a much better feel of Georgia in that game, playing against Steve Forbes' team. So some good stuff. Then Tennessee turns around and plays Colorado on Sunday. So that'll be a fun one.
And your client has Penn.
Yeah, the Quakers. The Quakers head south
good this year
to Columbia. They lost to Iona by 28 last night. But, I mean, Iona and the running, fighting Rick Pitino's.
Ooh, you know what? Chris Dortch had Penn winning the Ivy League, so there's that.
Well, I mean, Iona's coached by Rick Pitino. So losing by 28 to Ricky P, never a bad thing, I suppose. So there you go. If you wanted organization, you're not going to get that in these SEC basketball reaction videos when there is a slate as big as the one we saw on Monday and with football going on. So I apologize, guys.
Yeah, when football's over, we will be very locked into hoops. You know who's locked into hoops?
Stakes.
Our friends at Stakes. You can predict sports better than the crowd for a chance to win NFTs. With Stakes, players can cement their sports predictions against friends, other fans, and influencers forever. Don't let your sports genius go overlooked. Join Stakes and have the best predictions captured in the moment. Head to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 to get a double welcome bonus. It is not a betting app. It's a predictions app. It's free to join, free to play, and you help out the folks who help us out and have fun at the same time. Okay, Blake, we will be doing a ton of football stuff. We've got our live show Wednesday night where we'll preview the games, and that's always a listener-driven show, so folks can jump in the comments, ask us questions. We'll hit those. We'll do some hoops, I'm sure, again between now and the next week. Maybe some Friday night reaction stuff, or maybe not, depending on schedules. But point is, it's coming soon.
Yeah, we'll have. My guess is we'll do something for the Friday night games, even if it's an early Saturday something. We'll figure out a way to put something quick together. And then we will, if you're thinking about the basketball live stream specifically, those will probably not make their arrival until, I'd say, January. So, again, we'll still talk about them in the Wednesday night live streams during football season. But basketball-specific live streams we will probably start doing once conference play gets here. We'll figure out something for that. So hit that subscribe button.
All right. Thanks for watching. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We'll see you again soon at Southeastern 14.